Many people regard you as a personification of Ubuntu. What do you understand Ubuntu to be?
In the old days when we were young, a traveler through a country would stop at a village and he didn't have to ask for food or for water. Once he stops, the people give him food, entertain him. That is one aspect of Ubuntu, but it will have various aspects. Ubuntu does not mean that people should not enrich themselves. The question, therefore, is, are you going to do so in order to enable the community around you to be able to improve? These are the important things in life. And if one can do that, you have done something very important which will be appreciated.
The Open Source Report on the 4th of June 2019 from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. This is our open source, our technical version, where we look at open source software and also open source hardware. We partner with Cranston Software here. We've been in open source since 1988. Thus, we do speak with some limited authority about the open source movement. The title of this episode, Google, Gatekeeper for Profit. This is the episodes developed based upon an article from Bloomberg. Google Chrome becomes the web's gatekeeper, and rivals complain. Well, it's a little more than just that. It is a political side of the story, but firstly, we'll start off as we normally do with the Linux kernel. The Linux kernel is 5.1.7. That is the stable kernel. The release candidate is 5.2 RC3. That is on the 2nd of June. We, in one of our distributions, we have Ubuntu, and it's the 5.1. I believe 1.6. Slackware's principal 1. We're at let's see, where are we? We're at 4.19.48, I believe, and that is in the most up-to-date version of Slackware. That is Slackware Current. Now, that was last week on Thursday, so this is Tuesday we're doing this program. We'll have to check and see on that particular situation. Let's move very quickly here to, let's see. Okay, this is the release candidate 5.2 release candidate 3 is Linux. Here, basically, what has happened, fairly calm week. Release candidate 3 is almost exactly the same size as release candidate 2, which is a bit unusual. Usually RC2 is calm, and then RC3 is when people have started finding problems, and we get a new and more active week. But so far, be it for me to complain about calm work, so I won't. Anyway, the basic upgrade here is nothing particularly stands out. Yes, the continual SPDX work does kind of result in a consistent background hum of license comments, cleanups. It looks like look at the patch itself, and it's obvious that no code impact outside of one bug comment there. Anyway, even ignoring SPDX changes, there is just a small fix spread all over, not anything that looks particularly scary or worrisome. That is from Linus himself. And let me just clear this up about what is going on here. This is software package data exchange. That is the PD. The PDX is what it stands for. Software package data exchange is the file format used to document information on software licenses, which, given a piece of software, a computer software is distributed, is authorized by the SPDX, a working group which represents more than 20 different organizations under the auspices of the Linux Foundation. XPDX attempts to standardize the way in which organizations publish their metadata on software licenses and components in a bill of materials. Haven't seen that used in a long time. Anyway, nonetheless, that is what it is, and each license is identical by its full name, such as the Mozilla Public License at 2.0 and short identifier as MPL 2.0. Licenses can be a combination of AN and R groupings. For example, Apache 2.0 or MTT means that you chose between the Apache 2.0 license and the MIT license there, and depending on where you go, getting a little bit of that when we get into the open source Chrome. We'll get into that and how it is set up there, and it sort of drives us home. Anyway, nonetheless, the GNU public license, that's 2.0, has you have the choice of choosing a later version of a license built in, and sometimes it was not clear whether the SPDX expression of GPL 2.0 meant exactly GPL version 2.0 or GPL version 2.0 or any later versions, since the version 3 of the PDX license list, the GNU family of licenses get new names, and we look at GPL 2.0 only means exactly that, version 2.0, or GPL 2.0 or later is version 2.0 and any later versions. Hope we cleared up that little legal part of it there, at least what we can get in here. Oracle has a new kernel. We hadn't really attend an Oracle presentation, I don't know, 10 years ago, at least 10 years ago, when Oracle decided to get in the Linux business, and nonetheless, they have an unbreakable enterprise kernel, release 5, update 2. This is on their blog. Not that people there, but anyway, update 2 is based on the mainline kernel, and basically this is about the same thing. What is it? 4.14.35. And let me just get back to that one. Okay. 4.14.2.3 and 19. Anyway, just wanted to make sure where they were going. Some of these kernels are long-term kernels. The 4.41.8 is a long-term kernel, and the 4.14 is also a long And actually, the one we have is 4.1.948. I thought we'd find it sooner or later. That is, as far as I know, the latest Slackware kernel. So back to Oracle and where Oracle is. What are they doing? Yeah, well, they're basically about the same thing in one of the long-term kernels here, and basically what they have here. Pressure stall information, PSI. I really won't go into file system and storage fixed there, and a detrace, implementation of KTAS framework of a parallel CPU intensity kernel tuning dedicated to the ARM platform, using ARM there, and driver updates and periods. So that's basically about all that Oracle had to say. We're looking at Magenta 7, I hope I'm pronouncing that, release candidate ships with Linux 5.1 kernel, KDE Plasma 5.154, and Measure 19.1. There's a number of them that ship with that particular one, and MX Linux, I believe, is one that does that. That's it's a Debian situation there. But anyway, there's a lot of different distributions out there, and we just are looking at just a few of them. When we start looking at the distributions and how they pan out here. This is distrowatch.com. So Lundy, he was talking about this, but anyway, MX Linux is popular. And of course, Lundy's take on it was, it's kind of a diss of the month thing. I can remember the year. I remember when Ubuntu was certified by IBM. Then Ubuntu became not so much a server, but it did become a desktop. And Canonical went to a new heights in the so-called heavens. Happened to them. Prior to that, Red Hat was certified by IBM, as several of them, and so was SUSE and etc. But SUSE in the enterprise, whereas Ubuntu on the desktop, Slackware was not certified by IBM. But again, if we start looking at Debian actually went to space. It's been around a long time. A British implementation there, which Ubuntu has forked, is based on, and there's several of them that are based on that particular distribution. Very popular distribution. I have used it before. It uses the deb file extension there. Anyway, they have some here. What else do they have? Let's see. Ubuntu presents security podcast. Dell System 76. Here we're looking at somewhere here. They have. This is Alex Murray. This is one of the Ubuntu developers about Ubuntu. Security podcast, an initiative that has been around for several months, and we'll take a quick look at that article. And here he is, Ubuntu, and introducing the Ubuntu Security Podcast. It is a weekly podcast covering the latest news and developments from Ubuntu's security team, and I think it's there. We'll put a link to it. We in Slackware should do the same thing. I guess they are YouTube videos out on Slackware. There's some of the things to do with Slackware out there. Several of them people have attempted to do that. But here we spotlight all of open source, but we're a Slack warehouse, no doubt about that. We also look at security. We'll come with Krebs a little later there. But what has happened here more than anything else with Google and some of the others, they have Iowa Justice Department investigations shaping up, or other types of congressional investigations shaping up, and I think it's a good time that we take a quick look at what is going on there. And this is from the Reuters while we're here. U.S. moves towards major antitrust probe of tech giants, and of course they name several of them here: Amazon, Apple. Apple's come out with a new OS, Facebook, and Google. Now Elizabeth Warren and her campaign's talking about breaking these characters up. We'll see where it goes. Facebook's shares fell 7.5% on Monday, while Google owner Alphabet shared 6%. Amazon fell 4.6%. Apple only dropped 1 cent. But lawmakers have definitely weighed in on this. Lindsey Graham told that the business models of companies like Google and Facebook need to be scrutinized. And evidently a lot of the right-of-center politicians don't like Google. Different situation there. Marsha Blackburn, she's a senator from Tennessee, said the panel would do what she called a deep dive into the big tech companies, and even the center Blumenthal got into the argument there. So it's going to be a lot of scrutiny here. The EU has scrutinized them. Apple is subject of a EU investigation. This is what happens when companies such as Google and Google's been around long. Facebook become a more mature companies, such as what happened with Microsoft. The FCC settled an investigation of Google in 2013 with a reprimand. The company has been fined multiple times by the EU, and more recently in March, 1.5 billion euros. That's $1.7 billion. So things are companies rare to break up a company was now unheard of. You have Standard Oil, AT&T. You can ask them by that through a court action. But again, experts, legal experts say it's not likely to happen, but it could happen. There's no doubt about that actually happening. Let me. I'll put this is from the Linux Journal here. Nick Tulifero. Tulilero. Anyway, get him right. Billion internet radio receiver. This is on the 22nd. I won't go into much of it, but this person has lived everything from Santa Fe, New Mexico to New Zealand. And is a lover of radio. And his description here is a used notebook with an ultra-low voltage, a Core 2 dual processor, and an auto interface with an optional Toast-Link, and Pi Radio. That's an open-source Python radio program, and an external keyboard. So those are the things that you need. An external keyboard, that's kind of interesting here. Why the notebook and not a Raspberry Pi, or a shipment of similar ilk? Mostly due to me. Anytime in particular, it's not hard to find a high quality notebook about 10 years old for $50. I have some of those sitting around. So the cost is really not the difference. I find the development platform to be much quicker. In particular, I used the ThinkWiki to research the Linux support of the ThinkPad. On eBay, I found the least expensive units, often sold without hard drives, which is just fine with me, since I want a small SD to keep the computer, whose task is audio. You sell it on a ThinkPad X61, but any notebook would do for this. An optional audio link here, that is, or you can use the ThinkPad Wilkie here for whatever you need to do. And what is he using? An Agassi card bus, a sound card, because the system also doubles as an audio server for his FLAC recordings, right here, which was a bit more pricey, but to save a few bucks, you have to pick up USB to Tollink a converter from eBay. It's about $10. My fondness for Tollink is due to inherent electrical isolation that minimizes the chance of an audio hum, and we've heard that before too. Anyway, the pad here and how to do it, how to set it up, and you get the Pi radio. I think I messed around with this a little bit. Anyway, that's the console there, and we'll just pinch this. I won't spend any more time on it. And let me see, where else are we going? It's the antitrust action. We'll talk about this. Create a Linux or Windows virtual machine. You'll be talking about Linux here on Azure. That's a free account. Get started with 12 months of free service here. 12 months. It's a popular free service. What can I do with my free account? You get a terabyte of storage. For a month. Provision up to 14 virtual machines, and provision 50 virtual networks. Which products are free for 12 months? Well, the Linux virtual machine, file storage of 5 gigs, and what else do you get? Some other story here, blog storage, and you get a SQL database, 250 gigs there, and I'm not sure, some Azure Cosmos DB, and you want that anyway. And let's see, managed disk storage of 64 gig by 2, and bandwidth 15. Which products are always free? Well, the app there, and function compute, app compute, and event grid. And even Kubernetes, that's the Amazon Azure, part, and free API, that's plus learning machine. 30,000 per month, and some testing here, so you can get that if need be. You want to just mess around with it. Let's see what Mr. Krebs is doing here before we go to our feature here. No eternal blue exploit found in the Baltimore City ransomware. For almost 6 months, key computer systems serving the city of Baltimore, Maryland, were held hostage by a ransomware strain known as Robin Hood. Media publications have cited as sources saying Baltimore's version of hit the city computers was powered by external blue, a hacking tool developed by the U.S. National Security Agency, NSA, and leaked online in 2017. But a new analysis suggests that the whole internal blue could have been used to spread the infection. The Robin Hood malware itself contained no traces of it. The Times site, that's on the 25th of May, and security experts briefed on the attack, who blamed the ransomware spread on the Internal Blue Explain, while we link it to the global WannaCry ransomware outbreak in 2017. That story prompted denial from the NSA that the Internal Blue was somehow used in a Baltimore attack. It also moved the Baltimore City Council President Brenda Scott to write the Maryland governor asking for a federal disaster assistance. Anyway, kind of a long story here Mr. Krebs has going here. It's not known who is behind the Baltimore ransom attack, but Armat said it was competent that bad actors, let's see here, that the bad actors in this case were the same individuals using the now suspended Twitter account Robin Hood, until we have a suspect around 3 p.m. Eastern today. It's June 3rd. The account has been taunting the mayor of Baltimore, and they wanted $100,000. Several of the tweets, the account could be seen posting links to documents allegedly stolen from the city of Baltimore. So that's the city of Baltimore's story here. And this was the mortgage documents, 885 million mortgage documents from First American Financial. Documents were stolen there willy-nilly. Anyway, let's go to our feature story here, inspired by Bloomberg. Google Chrome becomes a web's gatekeeper, and of course rivals complain about it. Samuel Maddock built a browser that let friends watch online videos. At the same time, he used what was like the cheapest and simplest option there, Chromium. We've used Chromium. That's a free open source version of Google Chrome. Maddock's creation worked well, but because it was Chromium based, he needed another Google product called Widevine to authenticate users and prevent video piracy. He sent Google a request, didn't hear back for 4 months, and 10 emails later he got a one-liner, "Sorry, you can't use the software for that." He wasn't doing anything illegal. In fact, using Google's secure streaming tool would have assured his project was above board, but the internet giant withdrew access without saying why. Maddock gave up trying to make a browser. That's unfortunate. You have these gatekeepers like Google that decide which projects can work, and if they are not granted their permission, you're screwed. That's what Maddock said. That is a problem, and this is a problem when you have an open source product like Chromium that you can use, but then you need an additional product, and dealing with Google, that happens to be proprietary. That is a problem with in itself. Another example of how Alphabet unit power has grown to the point where regulators from India to the EU are looking for ways to keep it in check. The EU fined Alphabet. I think we talked about that. Chrome is an important clog in Google's digital ad system, distributing its search engine, providing a direct view for the company into what users do on the web. No doubt about that. And this is one of those things that pops up. How Google swamps rivals. Google won by other consumers by offering a fast and customizable browser for free while embracing open source standards. Now that Chrome is the clear leader, it controls how the standards are set, sparking concern. Google is using the browser and its Chromium open source underpinnings as to elbow online competition. Many major browsers are built on Chromium software code that Google maintains. Opera, I hadn't used it in a very long time, as an indie browser that's been used by techies for years, swiped its code from Chromium in 2013. Microsoft has switched to their browsers. I don't know if anyone still uses their old browsers or not. Anyway, to the Chromium to avoid being left behind. Chrome's competition relying on Google workers to do most of the work to keep Chromium software up to date. Chromium is open source, so anyone can use it. And we have used it. It hadn't developed on Chromium. I think maybe, well, anyway. Even if it isn't trying to sabotage competing browsers, Google has a financial motivation to dominate the market. And this is by somebody named Gil. I didn't get him up here. Anyway, he now works at Apple. Oh boy. After selling his startup Silk Labs to iPhone maker there. So he was in the business evidently. Also, earlier this month, Google announced a long-awaited decision on how Chrome handles online tracking of software known as cookies. Other browsers have blocked third-party cookies by default, but Google chose to let users decide. Chrome has become a spyware. That is from Brandon Esch, co-founder of Mozilla and currently CEO of Brave Software Inc. Brave offers a browser that blocks ads and web traffic software. It's also developed a system that pays users small amounts, penny or so. The only catch is the Brave browser is built on Chromium, as many others are. In August of 2017, Netflix suddenly stopped working on Brave's browser, and after a flurry of emails, the Brave chief technical officer, Brian Bodie, discovered that Google updates had changed the way Netflix are used. Again, this is this wide vine here, the same tool that Murdoch was trying to get permission to use. Brave hasn't been told about the changes, so its browser broke when it's visited Netflix online. Small share browsers are at the mercy of Google, and Google is stalling us with no communications to us there. And so Bounty, I get his name right here, wrote in a post on the developers collaboration site GitHub, which is owned by Microsoft. Very bad situation here. Another situation here was Google has ways to encourage them to come back. Another popular browser privacy conscious crowd called Videti had trouble when it comes to running Google services like Doc, Gmail, and so forth there. And anyway, saying that their browser isn't optimized, they're suggesting they download Chrome instead of that. So now the browser sort of bites the dust here, and that has happened. The browser is the thing which we see most of you. That is from Ibn Mullen, an antitrust professor at the Columbia Law School, has been studying browsers. Chrome has become the outright hostile to services that seek to cut down on advertising and blocking there. But blocking is still going on. Diversity of browsers, another matter. Microsoft, the world's largest software maker, needed Chromium it's hard to imagine Google losing its grip at any time soon, no doubt about that. So that is that particular story, and from the Register, no wide DRM for you. Developers left after 2 years of work, stymied by Google. In theory, the open source nature of web technology should allow anyone with the appropriate skills to innovate and implement an alternative browsing process. However, the path is gated. Major browser makers incorporate digital rights management, DRM. I've never liked that situation. The developer, they mentioned Mr. Maddock again there in his struggle. In a post, Maddock said, for the last 2 years, I've been working on a browser that now cannot be completed because Google, the creator of the open source browser Chrome, wouldn't allow an open source project. So that's when you have a situation out there with these people, and long argued by some in the open source community, that you play around with these proprietary organizations, that's what you get, literally. Other platforms have to rely upon DRM systems. Apple uses Fairplay, Microsoft Play Ready, Adobe uses Primitive Time, and so forth, and so on. Browsers and other apps can't stream videos from major content providers legally because of integrated forms of DRM that is in them, or in those. Other developers using Electron have observed that it takes months to get a certificate, passphrase, a key from Google to integrate into Windows. So this is part of the story here. And Chrome has about 68% of the market, 65% of the market according to them. That's a very large percentage. So what happens is you then have Foxfire out there, and Microsoft, which used to be the dominant with Windows Explorer, then later Edge, has disappeared roughly from the airwaves. Not to be one of those situations. So in closing out the program here, that's a very good example of what happens with these proprietary-led open source projects. They cause havoc, there's no doubt about that. And for people, particularly in the open source movement, that are more libertarian oriented, I can think of some. The guy that wrote, what was it, the Bazaar, I forget his name right now, but Raymond was his name. Anyway, old Raymond and some of these others effectively sold out the open source movement, and now this is where we are. However, because of the rapid pace of knowledge work now, more open source is opening up. Now, of course, you have the Linux Corporation and others where the corporate people in, but the changing conditions of industrial capitalism, particularly since we have very large players like China and Russia that are developing their own browsers. Red Linux, I've used it before. That was China's implementation, and I can recall back when China was going in the processor business, and Intel said, well, there's no reason to have a nationalized version of a processor, just ask how we. And one of the things that we had there, the Engineering Association, has now determined, let's get back to another picture here, to let Howie excuse me, have access to various things there, and somewhere here, the IEEE is who it is, and I'm not sure where we have that. No. Well, we had the IEEE here. Anyway, they have announced access to Howie. They can now access services of the IEEE, which we've been associated with for many, many, many years. Anyway, that's a standards organization, engineers and anyone else. At the time, you didn't have to be an electrical engineer, at least to have a degree in electrical engineering, to join, but you would feel free to join the service. That's all for us. We did get to, well, not exactly the bottom of what happened in Baltimore, with the city of Baltimore, with the ransomware, but we did hear from the NSA, and there are a lot of tools out there, and through sloppy work, they in the city of Baltimore, they had not updated their systems, and I believe they were running a Windows type system, which is very dangerous anyway. So if you are running a Windows server, whatever, 2000 or wherever you are there, make sure that you update the patches. I don't think you get 2000 anymore, but whatever you're running, make sure there are patches. If there are not patches and you're in the Windows world, you need to update them, and if you got clients Windows 10, the updates automatically come there. But if you really want to have a quality system, you go to Linux. There's a lot of distributions out there, and that way you can stabilize your system. And for cities, it's much, much cheaper. You get away from all these proprietary licenses. Some cities have tried to do that, and then they were forced because of some of the apps. But now you have Libra Office and various others that are very good products. We use it. There's another one out there. What is it? Open Office with Oracle, I believe, is that kind of tied up. So people have switched to LibreOffice. It's getting much, much better over time, and there's these other open source tools out there like GIMP, etc. Very good programs. We use Audacity. They've just come out with a new edition. I noticed that the editing is much easier there, and the quality is much better for our broadcasts, and we've always used Audacity. I'm not certain as to I think I can look very, very quickly here and find out what version we have. We do have the latest version, 2.3.1 is what we have, and it is a very good version. Nonetheless, this will do it for us. Just one other thing here. We have to talk about the Blues win in St. Louis over the Bruins, a quality Boston team, and it's interesting there because actually the Bruins are favored to win. It was a 2-4, so now the Stanley Cup is tied up 2-2. One of the things we've been doing here is starting to integrate sport into various other things here, and we're looking at some of the college teams. Michigan 17-6 over Creighton, and Oklahoma State 3-1 over UConn, and UCLA 6-3 over Loyola Marymount there, and Stanford 9-7 over Fresno State. That is, it was an elimination game there. And let's see here, the LA, that was another elimination round there, and the Oklahoma City elimination game, that was Oklahoma State. So we're dealing with a few of those. This is college baseball tournament. All points to Omaha is where they will end up. I don't see the softball scores. The women had their softball going on here, and I don't see it. Oh, here we go. The College World Series, UCLA hit a 4-run home run in Game 1. Let me see if we can. We aren't. Forget that. We'll give the baseball scores. I think open source report, this is something we've not done, but we shall tonight to fill things out. Nonetheless, our Cubbies 8-1 over the Angels in Wrigley Field. The Dodgers in the desert 3-1 over the D-backs, and the Padres 8-2 over the Phillies in San Diego, and finally the Astros, their winning ways out in Seattle 4-2. And that is baseball there. And let me see the NBA. Where are we with the NBA? I don't remember we had any. Anyway, the Raptors and Warriors will come up. That series is tied, I believe, 1-1. Game 3, yeah, 1-1 tie there. And the over-under is 213. And Golden State is favored, and no doubt about that's the line. Anyway, it is the open source report, but we have put a sport in it. We don't have time to give the soccer scores. We usually give those on the political side of Boston Red. We do sports. But we'll start to put sports in. I'm not sure we'll do it on the numbers man side. That's our macroeconomics program. We probably won't get it over there, but our goal is here to integrate all of our programs as much as possible that are on WBRN radio and the Boston Red network, because they overlap, and you can see what's happening here with Google or Facebook, these monopolies, as they're being investigated. That will also enhance such things as open source if they have open source projects, as with Chrome and Chromium. And the development work I've noticed on Chromium has not been, as they say, that stellar. And that is a big problem. The Apple Developers Conference, they were taunting Android. Android, of course, is a semi-open source product, and the latest is Pi, they call it, P-I-E. But what Cook was talking about, the head of Microsoft, that the newest Microsoft product for the smartphones was on more smartphones than Pi is on Android. Now, one of the big problems there is that it wasn't mentioned when you start talking about the Android updates. Those come through whatever type of phone you have. You have Samsung updates of that because they use the Google open source part. Same thing here with Huawei. But Google is going to Fuchsia, so they will be leaving the Linux kernel. That's the whole point there. Android does have the Linux kernel, much more secure than others. And another note also there, I think this is from Lundy. Old Lundy's always talking about something. You can check him out on YouTube. He was talking about Linux developers using Microsoft using MacBooks and Mac notebooks. A lot of people do that run, they run Linux on a Mac notebook. The problem is, in terms of hardware, Mac now uses Intel processors, no longer getting their processors from IBM, and at the same time, they use, I believe, NVIDIA cards there and various things of that nature. So effectively, the MacBook, if you want to, you can run Windows on it now with hardware setup, or you can run the Mac. I run it on compatible box. We used to call them IBM compatible. It's not IBM compatible anymore, but that type of x86 machine, you can run those on there with a little bit of tweaking. Nonetheless, this is M.A. at Cranston. Have a good week. We'll talk to you soon. Good day, as Paul Harvey would say.